disclosure wise that of course we're all just chatting about this is just for entertainment. Like we're all just learning. None of us are licensed professionals for this. So we're all just developing and we're learning. We're just trying to share together. So it's just entertainment. So let's all just try to have a nice chat about it. At the end, like towards the end, uh, if you guys have so what we're gonna do is like we're gonna have an interview, and then if some of you guys have some suggestions, like things that are on your mind, like I think maybe this would be a great thing to think about, or a suggestion, or something you want to say, you could just send it in the chat. Um, you can either just do it in the general chat, or if you put your mouse right over the main voice channel that we're in right now, right where that says main voice, there's a little dialog box for open chat. You could do it in there or in general, but definitely you're welcome to give some input on feedback or some criticism, anything. You're welcome to do that in the chat. But we're gonna have KCFT is gonna lead us off, and he's gonna be doing the interview, and he'll be streaming his screen. So in a second, when that starts, you can just jump in his stream if you'd like. Yeah, glad to. I'll hand the mic over to KCFT here.
Ziggy, man, thank you so much. It's great to have look at this audience here. It's so cool to have so many people interested in hearing Tyson go through his interview. I guess I could just tell you a little bit about myself. I met Ziggy through Ziggy. Is that all right if I give like a little background on how I know you and all
Oh,
that stuff?
absolutely. Yeah,
Is that
definitely
cool?
go on the intro and we can go into it after. No problem.
Yeah. Okay. And if anybody wants to dig into this, I met Ziggy through Future 70 FT71's community called Convergent. And at that time, I was a RTY trader trying to figure it out. My history was as I was brought in, I paid for some training through a company called oh God, I can't even remember. Oh, OTA, Online Trading Academy. I don't know if you guys know anything about that, but I tried to study this stuff myself, and I didn't even understand like buy and sell, bid, ask. Like I just got overwhelmed by all the financial terms, and I said, okay, I just need somebody to train me. I'm self-taught in everything else. I can play instruments, and I'm a network engineer. Is how I started my career and all that stuff, but I just couldn't figure it out, So I paid for that, and kind of like quickly figured out I didn't think it was legitimate. And then I came across somebody who was part of oh golly, who's that capital company that Merritt Black used to work for? Zig, do you remember?
Yeah, it's
SMB
SMB.
or
Yeah.
Yeah, SMB. Yeah. So where I live, KC, I met an SMB capital trader, as it were, through OTA, through not LinkedIn, Meetup. And, he agreed to take me under his wing, which, helped me lose, I don't know, golly, $8,000 in my own money. That was fun. And only to realize he wasn't really a coach, and whatever he knew how to do, he couldn't translate to me. And then that got us to Convergent, and I met Ziggy because I'm trying to figure this stuff out. It's so hard, you guys know that. And I'm trying to be process driven, and Convergent gave us a task of posting your daily journal. And one of the things that people kept saying about me is that my process is so legit. It's so complete, it's so detailed, it's all that. And then that Ziggy kind of saw me there and then invited me to a group that we were invited to create by Convergent, to sort of like this. And that was a neat experience. But through that, I became exposed to the group as somebody who just is really good at digging into how to think about things. And that's kind of the role I have in my career. So if you look me up on LinkedIn, you can find out about me, about what I do and who I work for and all that stuff. But this is just something that's innate to my personality. And he thought, well, would it be cool if we did this again? And it's a service I offer, but this is kind of a way of getting to know traders and understand what they're doing. And one of the things that I do is I do workshops for companies and for traders to sort of diagnose where the break point is in their process. And so that's kind of like how we got together. And I'm excited to have an opportunity to talk to Tyson about what he's doing. So Tyson, are you here?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, man.
My mic sounds okay.
Yeah, sounds perfect.
Yeah, how's it going? Well, I'm Tyson. we haven't talked directly, I don't think, in the chat really, but I've seen you in there actively.
Yeah, I try and get
Um,
active usually after the market. I've found it really it can trigger things with me that are not positive. So sometimes I hate that. I'd love to be able to do both, but I'm usually not able to.
yeah, like chat while you're training or whatever kind of thing.
I get, yeah, for me personally, and
Yeah,
maybe everyone feels the same way, but we don't want to admit it. But like, I get so ego driven with it. You know, I want to prove I'm good. I
yeah,
want
for
people to
sure.
follow me. I want to be right. It just has such a negative effect. But
Yeah, I mean, I've struggled with that too in the past, and like I've kind of depends on the day, but I try to not let that affect me. But it has been nice going back and forth in like the R2Y group. It's mostly like Ziggy and Spartacus, whatever. We go back and forth a little bit, but I feel like we're all kind of on our own thing that we don't really, mess each other up during the trading session. And I do kind of keep it muted, so I'm not like looking at notifications and letting it affect my bias or whatever. But I know what you mean. It can be destructive if you let it get to your ego.
absolutely. So tell us about your trading. I guess as a trader myself, I'm familiar with basically all the systems that are available: market profile, price action, footprint, delta trade. I mean, like, I've got it all in some respects. I doubt you'll do
Yeah.
something I haven't heard of before. But tell us a little bit about your trading and how you got into it. In terms of what draws you into it, what's your particular way of dissecting the market, and let's just start there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have a pretty basic story for how I got into it. Kind of same old thing. Like mine started, I just saw ads of people trading for probably about a year, and it was just always on the back of my mind. The stock market, didn't really know much about it. Um, and then it wasn't until I actually had a friend, not that close with him, but I saw him actually post about trading. And that's when I was really like, okay, like this thing's for real, like once you see someone close to you or someone you kind of know do it, you're like, okay, it's probably more legit compared to like all the ads and stuff. So I saw him post about his trading. I think he was literally just posting his P&L. So I reached out to him like, hey man, like are you trading stocks? Like what are you doing? Like I knew a little bit. I was like day trading, whatever. And he started explaining to me and kind of just got me started. With kind of the basics, like even just like how to open up an account and all that. Because like I'm from Canada and it's a little bit more difficult here,
Yeah,
especially with like commissions and brokers and stuff like that. I don't know if you're
yeah, the rules
from
are
the
different.
state. Yeah, so it's we don't have the PDT, which is one thing I realized was like, okay, this is pretty sweet. Um, Even though I ended up in futures anyway, so it didn't matter. But I did start with like ETFs kind of thing, like correlated ETFs, like related to like natural gas and stuff like that. Um, So that's what he was trading back in the day. I think it was like if you guys ever heard of like DGAS and UGAS, they're like I think ETNs technically that tracked like natural gas, um, stuff like that. And so I kind of just started like diving into it myself. Um, I didn't buy any courses. I still never have bought in the trading course. I don't know. It was kind of one of these things that I just didn't. I felt like that could really waste me money because I really didn't know what I didn't know, right? Like
Right.
I, so at that point, looking back, it could have, you know, been worse because I could have, you know what I mean, got some more guidance from the start. But I feel like when you're new, you don't even know your niche and you don't even know like where to begin. So I
Right.
was kind of just diving in and just like looking at everything. And I mean, compared to where I started and to where I got to, how I trade futures now is like so different, but you kind of just have to dive in and look at everything. So I was like, I'm not going to buy a course and just follow someone because you don't even know who is legit out there either. So it does take a while to find your niche. But anyways, this guy was trading. Obviously, I don't think he trades anymore, which is also kind of a classic. People don't last very long. But I mean, once I saw him doing it, I was like, hey, this is legit. And I dove in, started, studying a bunch of material on my own. Kind of the classic, you watch videos and people explain how hard it is, but I feel like you never really understand until you do it yourself. Like you could watch as many videos as you can, but it just doesn't change. And obviously you have that, your ego party. You're like, oh, I'm different. I'm going to figure this out. And I was like, I can, give me a year, not even, you know what I mean? I'll start making money. You don't realize how hard it is. And then open up an account, started trading. I remember my first trade. I started with a lot more money than you probably should have. So my first trade was a winner, which is probably the worst thing that could happen. So I remember I made literally, it was like, I think it was like $50 or something. And I remember putting on that trade, and like my heart was like, I don't know, it depends, I guess, on your personality, but like for me, it was like clicking that button. Like I couldn't even get myself to click that button probably for like a year. Like that, I just struggled with like actually entering a trade because my heart would just be going. I'd be sweating. Like, I don't know if it's at that point, like I was just the money aspect. It was just like, I don't know, it was crazy to me. Anyways, I made $50 on my first trade. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like it was like, I don't know, a couple minutes. I was like, wow, like this is for real. Like I just made $50 and like I just clicked a button. And I mean, from there you're just hooked, right? And that's probably just your gambling instinct and just kind of the thrill of it. So from there, I think my second trade I even won. I remember, and it was like $200. And then, in my head I'm thinking, oh, like I'll figure this out, and you don't even think about like the losers, how that's gonna feel. And I was like, oh, like there's gonna be losers, gonna be winners, but overall I'll make money. And then I remember getting my first loser, and I remember it was one morning and I took a trade and I lost like, I think it was like $100 maybe, and I was like, damn, that happened quick. I was like, wow, that money's just gone. I was like, okay, it's fine, make another trade. Took another trade, probably lost another $100. I was like, wow. And then that's when you really start feeling those emotions for the first time. If you've never obviously traded before, like it's a crazy feeling that only traders can understand. And you start feeling, wow, like, well, I need to make that money back, right? And then fall into that loop. Anyways, so that's when I realized it was real. And this was about probably in end of 2018, beginning of 2019 is when I started. But I feel like I only really got serious about it, I'd say, mid 2020 because of the lockdowns and everything. I actually had the time. So, and that's another thing you realize is like trying to do this as like a little side gig and on your own, like you're like, oh, I'll just do this here and there, learn about it. Like it doesn't really get you much. Like I wasted a lot of time, probably, the first, over a year, just like kind of learning and like paper trading. And then
what was your time frame?
Sorry?
What was your time frame? Were you day trading?
I was day trading out from the start. Never really was swing trading or anything, was day trading. And yeah, so I was taking those live trades like I did. Then I lost, probably about $2,000. And I was like, okay, this is for real. I got to actually like learn. Typical, you know what I mean? And then kind of for like a year, I was just kind of like learning still just about like ETFs and stocks and stuff like that. Didn't really know anything about futures other than like I was using it sort of to track natural gas. I knew it was called a future. I didn't know you could like how to trade it or how to trade in contracts and all that kind of thing. For about a year, I was just learning and paper trading and didn't really make much progress because I just wasn't I wasn't doing it. Like you really have to like trade every day and track your results and like eventually go live as quick as possible. Like obviously when you have like you shouldn't be live. I shouldn't have went live. But like once you can go live with a small amount of money, like you have to get to that step because that's just the difference is huge, as we all know. So getting to that step, it took a while because I feel like I was just, I was in school in the time, I was working at the time, so I did have other things in my life. Like I said, it's hard to do it when you have a bunch of stuff going on. Like you really have to put a lot of time into this. So it took to probably about mid 2020 when the lockdowns happened. And I remember I just saw someone on Instagram or because I started following traders and whatnot. And he posted like this weird chart and it was like all these letters and stuff. And I'm like, well, that's interesting, right? And he was posting about these like composite zones and how he's using these zones. And he was just basically trading like once you accepted back into a composite zone or whatever, he would go long and then ride it to the other end of the zone.
Good old market profile.
Or whatever. Yeah, and I was like, this is fascinating. And like he was posting these levels and like when you see the accuracy of some zones and levels the first time, I was like, wow, like these things are respecting them to the tick and like reversing. And I was like, wow. And I noticed like that kind of stuff doesn't get much engagement and I've never really seen other people posting it. So I started like researching it and it's very niche. compared to, I feel like, the whole other industry. And I was like, okay. And that kind of sparked like an interest of, if it's not as popular, like it's like, to me, that seemed very valuable, because it was kind of like, look the other way when everyone else is, you know what I mean, looking at something else.
I do think people talk about it like that. That they think that way of organizing the market is, if it's less popular, then that means that maybe it has an edge to it, which brings up the whole topic of what is an edge. And that was a topic that was quite frustrating to me at Convergent, because no one could actually define it. I want to cut you off because I want to get into like how you actually trade. But one of the dilemmas that I ran into is that every trader I ever talked to could not, and was one of the reasons I went away from OTA. I asked them what's a good setup, and no one could define it. And then I asked people what an edge was, and nobody could define it. Nobody could put it in language that was quantitative. Everything was qualitative. You see that on Twitter all the time when people say, let your winners run and cut your losses. Well, it'd be fucking awesome if I knew which was which. That would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? Like before I was offsides or before I was not, like, how would I know that? And there be what market profile does for people. It did for me. And I read up on, oh golly, now I can't remember his name, but the guy who's a big talker on market profile basically invented it.
Jim Dalton.
Jim Dalton. I read both of his books and tore through them. Yeah. What you come to realize is that it's language and vocabulary, and it comes with logic. And so with that, it's like learning a video game. It has rules. Some of those rules can be bent. Others can be broken. Where have we heard that before? And I think that's what becomes fascinating as the trader learns the language of that particular view of the market. It seems like an edge. It's not. It's just a way of organizing the information is really all that it
100%,
is.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Let's just talk about futures for a second to keep the topic a little bit more narrow. How do you trade today? How would you describe your system? And then let's quickly get into, like, what do you feel like is a problem for you? I have some clue. Ziggy gave me a little bit of information, but I want to hear it in your words.
Yeah. So I'd say, I'm still developing a lot, and I feel like I'm at that point. I've definitely been focused on the market profile for probably over 2 years now. So I do use auction theory as my main way to organize information and look at the market.
So you're using Sigma measurements away from VWAP as a part of your view of the market in addition to market profile. Is that true?
I don't get too deep into VWAP other than just the single standard VWAP, weekly VWAP, monthly VWAP. I don't look at the deviations.
Okay. All right.
I have, but that's not a huge thing. I am very structured based, like looking at the developing TPO in a 30-minute time frame.
Got it.
And then I work down from there onto like a trigger chart or whatever. But so I'd say to go over how I actually trade has definitely been developing as, I make my own, because that's always one of my thing. Like when you hear, like, you really have to design your own edge. Like you can learn stuff from other people, but like you can't just copy really someone's edge. And that's kind of what the hard thing is in the industry, because people are selling these strategies, right? And you think you can just buy that and then trade their strategy. But like what I feel like I've done very well is really focused on creating my own kind of setups. Like obviously you steal stuff from other people here and there, but then you create it into something that you can understand yourself. And that's what I've been able to do, I feel like, with the profile. But I'd say I have like a defined playbook that is based around open types and then initial balance, with how value is compared to price. So I'd say, in a simple way, how the markets move, right? Like they move in balance, and then you get a move away from balance, and then they go back to balance until the next move.
So are you trying to trade expansions, or are you trying to trade reversions back to value?
So I basically have, I'd say like a setup for all scenarios of how a market trades. Some people would say like there's only 3 really different ways a market trades, right? So I would say I have a setup defined for every instance of that. So like if you're in balance, you know what I mean, and you get a extension away from balance, I'd be looking to trade if value is not moving with price, and I look for price to move back to value, right? And using that, also looking at like behavioral statistics and, you know what I mean, what is normal market behavior, and identifying that, and then using that as what's the market trying to do and how good of a job is it doing.
Yep.
And really just because the market obviously is random, we all know that, but there's things that it does day in and day out that are, you know what I mean, predictable. And so you rather, obviously things aren't going to work out 100% of the time, we all know that, but there's things that happen very often, and if you can identify that, then you're able to, you know, get an edge from that, because you can put the odds in your favor. Like when I heard, like learning about statistics, right, and like the initial balance statistics, like learning about that like really blows your mind, because it's like the market does things repeatably, like more than 50-50, like of odds, right? So if you're able to put yourself in a position to take advantage of that, it gives you an edge, right?
Yep.
And if you can organize the data using something like market profile, and then developing a playbook, your own playbook around that, I feel like that's the way to success, right? But we all have impulsive behaviors that, you know, ruin that.
Yeah, Ziggy was telling me that. He was, you know, as we were looking at it, you know, that the patience for waiting for an unknown amount of time, you know, in between what you think you know of as what you would call an A+ playbook setup, and doing that versus active impulsively, you know, there seems to be a challenge for that. Is that how would you put that into your own words? What does it feel like when you're doing that during the day?
Yeah, so I think it's one of those things that I feel like we all can relate to, where you know your setups and you create a plan, and then you're in this mindset that you feel like, you know, you're prepared to do what you have to do. The market opens, prices start moving, and all of a sudden, you know, you find yourself, or you may notice something that looks like a trigger to get into a trade.
Yep.
And so you enter that trade, and then say it's a loser, right? And then all of a sudden you like almost snap out of it, and you go, was that even that setup? Right? And you're like, what setup was that? And you're like, that was like, look at this. And then you notice a piece of information. You're like, that was so clear. I shouldn't have been long there. And like, I knew better than that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like, that's very simple to see, like hindsight,
but only after the fact.
After the fact, and even sometimes before the fact, you can tell yourself, you know, you shouldn't take that trade, and then all of a sudden you end up in this trade that before wasn't even what you planned to take, right?
Yep.
And you kind of just sit there scratching your head, and you're like, how did I do that again? Or how did I take that trade when I knew it either wasn't my playbook, or it just wasn't. It wasn't really a quality setup, right?
Yep.
Because I feel like the market tricks you all the time into almost like looking like it is an A+ setup,
mm-hmm.
but after you go, oh, that wasn't one at all. And that's what you got to really be careful with. And I've been working on is, you know, triggers to get into trades. And I feel like that's what most of people who trade, and people even you ask who are actual traders and or claim to be, would say, like, they're like, oh, a flag pattern, that's your trigger, you know what I mean? Boom, get in. But no one talks about the actual narrative and context behind that, and where's the market actually going, and like, what's your targets, and like, what's the risk for that?
Yeah. One of the things I used to struggle with a bunch, and, you know, sometimes still do, but I know why. I know when I do, and I know why I do. But I'll tell you about the history of it, and I want to dig into this with you, is context. You just said that, narrative and context. That's important.
Yep.
Because you know, Futures Trader at Convergent was always about what's the context, and I was like, yeah, I mean, when you first hear that, it almost sounds like the day has just been saved. You're like, holy cow, I was going to make a bad decision, but thank God context showed up.
Yeah.
And that's true. It is a very useful word as long as you understand what it means. What is it defined? Context on what time frame? And what view of information? Yeah. How would you break that down? And that's the question I want to dig into with you. So you have these A plus setups. You also said something very interesting, and I hope for everybody who's listening, think about what he just said. We all focus on the triggers. I want to tell you that is the least meaningful piece of information that we prioritize. We prioritize it as the most. It's actually the least. And I just want to tell you guys something that as I dig into this here with Tyson, I want to tell you my view of the world, so that, if you do work with me later on, you don't have to, it doesn't matter. I'm doing this for free because I like it. But I don't think that the problems that we have are indicator based. I even don't think that they're psychological. I think they're process driven. I think the number one problem with every trader everywhere, including me, is process and process awareness. If you understand the process and you accept the realities of that process working over time, then you're going to have far fewer problems. Now, there is a transition period where, by engaging with something that is uncomfortable, or you haven't really sort of accepted the risk with, you will cross over into that emotional portion of your personality where nothing can save you at this point. You've actually just got to close everything and walk away, because you are out of control. You're now emotional, and process can't save you from that. Process can only indicate it to you, and then you have to be willing to take the action. But 98% of, I made up statistic, but I think it's reasonable. 98% of the time, the reason that we're failing is because we do not understand our process. And Tyson, you made an example of that with, why is it that I was tricked into taking this setup that that is not an A plus setup? How did that happen? So let's dig into that. Do you have an example that we could go over, see if we can pick this thing apart?
Like a specific trade example, or like where you would see this happen? Or?
There's something that happened recently. It doesn't have to be super specific. It's not crucial that we, I'm not trying to put the business to you or anything like that, but I want to create the context narrative so that we can speak at it specifically rather than being generic. Could have something that just happened. It doesn't even have to be a trade that you took. Yeah. It could be an example of like what happened today.
I can say actually yesterday is a decent example of this happening to myself. Are you
able to pull up your screen, or I can pull up my charts if you want to do that? You look at market profiles. So I don't actually have market profile.
Yeah. Up. I can keep it simple just in like my words.
Sure.
Just I can just say like yesterday it was on the RTY because that's predominantly what I trade. But anyways, it was, so part of my process is, I'd say about like 90% of the time, I have trades off the open, and then after that's kind of done, I'm waiting for the IB to be complete. Mm-hmm. So before I take a trade, I want to see the IB complete, either to the upside or the downside, right?
And that'll tell you which direction you want to trade in, right?
Yeah, so that gives me an edge after that's completed, right? Because there's like a 97% chance in most products for futures that will take either the high or the low of the first hour. And then once that high or low is taken, there's only about a 30% chance it will take the other side. So that kind of gives you an indication of who's in control, and you kind of want to look to join those either buyers or sellers, right?
Right.
So basically yesterday, we did not have the IB complete yet. And we were coming up on, we just failed a couple ticks from the A low. So we did not take the initial bounce low, but I noticed that ES and the NQ both took their lows, right? So that then makes me have a bias on RTY that, okay, I'll most likely be looking for the low to be taken here, because a lot of times they are correlated, not always. That's why you gotta, when you stay on the product you're trading. But they do follow each other, and so that kind of was like, okay, this is an opportunity here. I start thinking, even though my plan is to wait for the IB, so you get that confirmation, I'm thinking, okay, there's high odds here that it will probably take the low, right? You start telling yourself this, and we get this pullback, pretty sharp pullback to near the IB high. We didn't take it yet, but we still had good excess from B period, and I noticed this trigger, and once D period opened up, of like a mechanical high, we call it a weak high in market profile terms.
Just a single print, right?
Yeah, they were like a tick away from each other, the high of the C period and the D period, right?
Yep.
So a lot of times that can show, some people look at it as a weak reference that should be repaired, but if it holds, it's kind of showing lack of, buying, and you would reverse. So basically I saw that, and that can be a trigger that I can use sometimes for entries. Because when they do hold, they can be pretty significant, to go the opposite way, because that just shows kind of the auction shutting off, right? And so we didn't have initial balance complete, but I had that bias in my head, even though I know I should have been waiting for real confirmation of which side was going to be taken, that I found myself, okay, this is decent. It'll probably flush back to the lows. ES and NQ were going for the lows, so I took that trade. It wasn't long, and then it came and stopped me out. And then immediately after, I go, why did I not just wait till the IB high was taken? And then shortly after the IB high was taken, and that the rest of the day we got that. Yesterday we had that strong move up, right? In the RTY, and it was so much clearer after that was taken that it would have been a great long trade. And I called it a day after that, and I did realize there was one point I could have gotten a good long trade, but what I did was I kind of ruined that because I took that trade before the IB, and then I'm thinking, like, why did I do that, right? Even when I knew, and I know right now consciously, but I can even say for myself that if that happened again, there's probably a chance I would do that again, right?
Yep.
Just being honest, I think we can all just be honest with ourselves. You can say it now, but once you're in the moment, you do things like that, right?
So if we de-emotionalize that for a second, and let's just unpack it, why do you think that your brain told you that this was an opportunity?
I think it had to do with how I got fixated on that trigger that I have. Because this trade, I'm not saying it could have not worked. It could have worked, right? That's the thing about the market. You can be rewarded for a bad trade or a trade out of your playbook.
Or it's done that. See, here now, I'll flip it on you because I'm neutral in all this. I don't think you made a wrong decision at all.
Yeah.
I mean, your brain told you that this has happened so many times before that it's applied intuitive information to you by way of process. Now, it just happened to be that intuitive information countermanded your written process. But you overrode that. And you said, wait a second, my intuition's telling me. And I've got other information, I've balanced it out. So the question I have for you, when I pull this back and I say, okay, we've got a trigger that told you to go look for information. You looked for that information. You found it. That was confirmation. What part of your process told you to go look for that other information?
Sorry, which part of my process told me?
Well, remember you said that you went and looked at the indices, the ES and Q, I think you said. Yeah. And you saw that as a reason to go short. So where is that in the stage of your context building and your narrative?
Yeah, so that was a part of, I feel like that would be one part of my process where I'm looking at the other indices for sometimes correlations, because if they're all three really following each other, that can kind of give you an edge if one is leading a little bit to kind of, right, obviously get in another index kind of beforehand. It can give you information in a way before it happens on another index, right?
Sure, but what happens if they, let's say that they broke that low, and then now you're looking at your index and saying, okay, that it's going to go the same way, and that trigger sets up again. And then it just turns out that it breaks the high and then goes into parity. What does that do? What happens then?
Yeah, so that would change things, right? And that's kind of what happened. Like yesterday, that break to the downside on the other indexes didn't end up being as meaningful because we ended up going neutral. So we ended up taking the IB high on both of them as well, but we didn't on the RTY. It was just lacking, so it didn't take that low, so I ended up taking the high, right?
So that's what I'm asking. It becomes a data point that created confirmation that on top of the trigger.
But it was just one data point, right? So I fell into the trap of using one data point in one trigger, but really I forgot about the overall context, which after the trade was done, I was able to identify.
So let's zoom out, because I'm really familiar with the one data point overriding everything else, even the 2 hours of preparation you did for that morning.
Exactly, right?
Really familiar with that one. I want to blow it out and say, okay, what part of you now I don't mean like written process, but what part of your actual process makes it possible that one data point could override everything? What is it that you're doing that makes that possible? I'll confess mine, that what it used to be. I was zoomed in too close to the charts. literally, I was not looking at enough data at once. So that was a process my error on my part. That's how it became possible to zero in on a trigger and allow that to override everything else.
I would say that's 100% what happened to me on this trade.
So you're looking at not enough data on your charts.
Yeah, so it's almost the point where, I got zoomed in on a single point of data, and it's almost like you go tunnel vision, right? And even if you subconsciously know the overall context, it's almost like you forget in a second because you see this trigger.
Let me interrupt you, Tyson. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. And here's why I don't agree with that. Your brain was functioning correctly. Your brain was processing correctly the information that it had. It didn't have enough information, and that's why the weighting overrode in that moment. The context that you're talking about, there's one that's theoretical, process driven, and then there's the execution process. So how you have your charts structured is part of the execution process. So you're not seeing enough information. It could be that you're sitting too close. It could be, I don't know about you, I've, like Ziggy and I, for a time, we would watch each other trade. Like I would see people get their face too close to the chart because there are decisions being made. So that's what I'm pointing out to you. I don't believe in the idea that because a trade didn't work out, or it did, or something like that, that means I'm bad, or I broke the process. No, I think the market teaches us what it does. That's how we came to the conclusions on the plays and the setups and the triggers and all that. I think it correctly interpreted what it was doing based on the information that was presented. But when you zoom out the perspective, you realize it was based on a very narrow piece of information.
Yeah. And I'm agreeing with you on what you're saying there. That's the point where I'd say I struggle with is pinpointing that. I think accepting bad trades more instead of really diving into them so much, and just looking at all the things that were wrong about it, and almost being like, oh, I could have, if I noticed this, I could have been right. If I noticed this, and like those are kind of hindsight looking back at a trade. And I feel like every trade that I've like losers, I'm always able to look at it and pinpoint a reason why it didn't work. Instead of just being like, it's a part of the process, you don't lose them all. Like even knowing that,
right?
I feel like I'm not at that point yet. And I don't know how other people feel about this, but when I feel like how many people actually just take a loser and don't think too much about it and just be like, yeah, it was a good trade, just didn't work.
Yeah, like only people who are comfortable. I can give you the answer to that to a certain extent, because it that in it of itself is just a process that's executed. So, for example, how many times have you been away from the market? Like whatever you did good, you did bad. But have you ever noticed that once you shut your charts down and then you go do something else and you have fun, like that sort of grieving period that we all have when we've screwed up big time, and then we shut our charts down and we go off and we think about it way too much, and then finally whatever, it dies down. For some reason it dies down. And then when you come back to the charts, you're kind of neutral again. And then you look at them and you're like, oh yeah, that was really, how did I think that was possible, or whatever. We can all relate to that, because what we did is we were unintentionally engaged with a process that could only deliver a bad result. And so then our body took over and did what it was supposed to do, which is tell us that that's a problem, let our emotions grieve. We go through that process. I'm not trying to solve that from a psychology standpoint. In fact, I don't think it's solvable from a psychology standpoint. Somebody tells you that you can control your emotions, they're wrong. You have emotions, you can't control them. You can prevent them from getting to a point where they're harming you, but you usually have to cut them off before they get to that point. So, for example, I want to bring this all the way back. How do you feel good about a trade and your process? It's actually simpler than you'd think. Number one is, as soon as you take that trade and you knew that it was outside of your theoretical process, your written down, your plan, you shut all your charts down and you walk away until the grieving process is over. That has to be what you do until you learn self-control. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, Tyson.
But that takes self-control.
Is that hard to do, or is that easy to do? Now, if it's hard to do, you already know what I'm about to say. It's because your emotions are already in control and you're already not following your process. How do I know that? Because your emotions are in control and you're not willing to shut down the charts. It's literally that simple. One of the problems that we fall into is not that we can't trade, not that we don't know how to have an edge, is that we're not willing to submit to it.
Yeah. It really is just a submitting, and you can be aware of it. I think that's the hardest thing. Like, I'm at the point where I'm completely aware of what I have to do and what is an ideal like process. And like you're saying, like actually just you make a mistake, shutting down the charts and walking away for the day. Like it's so, that's the right thing to do. How many times have we just not done that?
So let me give you an example of why I think process is the problem and how we can get there. Because it's one thing to call out a problem. It's like what you discovered with market profile. You're like, wow, this is so much better way of organizing. Okay, me saying it's process isn't actually an answer. It's just, this is one of the things that always frustrates me about trading. People say summary answers, but they don't explain how to get there, like cut the winners or cut the losers, let the winners run, or like whatever, all that stuff. That drives me crazy. Okay, so how do you get there? Okay, well, let me put you in an example, and anybody that wants to interact with this, listen to this. If I taught you since you were 4 years old how to hit a baseball, okay, and that skill grew really slowly, 5, 6, 7, 10, 8, whatever, how many years, 10, 12 years. And over that period of time, you had been hitting 300 average. Okay. And you're doing really good, but then something happens. It just all clicks. And now every time you face a right-handed pitcher who pitches sub 100 miles an hour, they don't know this, but you know this. Every time you hit a home run, every time. Okay. Let's say it happens 100 times in a row. On the 101th time, what are you thinking is going to happen? What is the only thing you're thinking is going to happen?
You're going to hit it.
You're going to hit a home run. Why?
Yeah. Because you know you've done it.
Yeah, process taught you that. Process taught you that. Okay, so what have I said? Unpack this. Your brain, through process, taught you that week high was going to fail. So you believed it. Why? Because you'd seen it before, you took it before, you saw it but didn't take it and it didn't work out, and then you forgot the times that it did, that it didn't work against you or something like that. We are learning computers, and one of the things that we do, especially in this very sophisticated thing called trading, is we move too quickly. I struggle with this too. I don't want to be trading the size I'm trading. I want to be trading much bigger, much bigger. So what does that induce me to do? Go faster. It induces me to make choices that are against my best interest, which is having the years of hitting home runs that it takes to know that every time I click the button, it's going to be a home run. Or it's not. And if it's not, I immediately say, whoa, something's off in the force, because that should have done something. Now, Ziggy and I had this discussion some time ago about saying the word should. I absolutely believe in the word should. I didn't used to, because I thought it was a negative thing, in a sense of like, well, then I'm just building up toxic waste in my mind about, well, I think the market should do this and it's all just random. That's bullshit. Yeah, of course, it should do this. It should do this. And if it doesn't, I'm not interested. It's really that simple. And why is that? Why can I say that? Because from a process standpoint, either the logic is present that frames the trade, or it is not. And if it is not, I cannot engage in it, because then I'm being irrational. And the likelihood of me, the weak person that I am, being triggered emotionally and then making another bad decision is like 1,000,000%. You see?
Yeah.
You're not a bad person. You're not a bad trader. You're not a bad anything. The issue is that the level of effort required to be focused on, and you said something earlier, which I think is so profound, and actually was the key, like, to me discovering how to get to where I'm at. You can't copy anybody else. Why not? Well, because the level of detail that you need to know that your process works for you, it's like me trying to copy a pitcher. How could I do that? Or I can emulate Michael Jordan, but I will never be him. It's the same thing. I don't have his body. I don't have his emotions. I don't have his killer instinct. I don't even have his talent. But, I can emulate those things, but I've got to make it my own. And what that means is examining every decision point until there are no variables unaccounted for. Now, I want to say that again. Examining every decision point until there are no variables unaccounted for. Now, have you done that? Probably not. I know I didn't. I know I still discover things that I didn't account for. That's the difficulty we face.
And I think that's like that trade we were talking about, that's what I did not do, right? I was looking at one variable instead of going over all the variables in my process to confirm that that's a valid trade. And you get sucked into one thing that can trigger you into a trade. But that's why it's so important to ask yourself questions before you enter a trade, right?
I think in addition to that, I mean, I don't love to give advice without knowing more, but I'll give you an example. Have you ever seen, you probably have seen movies of this, but it does happen. There is an FAA flight manual for problems on airplanes. And every time a pilot picks up the manual to do their pre-flight check, they're reading a manual. They should be reading a manual. And planes where they don't do that, they crash. Because I'll give you another statistic. I want to stick on that one, but I'll give you another one that's actually based in research about infections and doctors. The flight manual, they pick it up and they read the checklist. Why do they do that? Is it because they don't know where the buttons are? You'll see pilots that have 10,000 hours that will still follow that checklist. Why? Checklist saves lives. And if you cannot boil your process from a preparation to an execution to a management to a collapse all the way down to a checklist, if you cannot do that, then you are taking on in your process some level of intuition, which is not process. That's just skill, talent, ability, whatever. Some people can do that. I've found most cannot.
And that's where that argument about intuition comes into trading, right?
Yep.
Which is a whole nother thing.
Have you ever listened to somebody talk about their trading from an intuition standpoint? I don't know about you, but they sound like a freaking idiot to me. I'm like, you just do the thing, and you get there with the thing, and it just does the thing, and you're like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? I don't understand that at all.
They say you should be able to like describe your process to like a 5-year-old or something, right?
Yeah.
Like if you truly, like you said, because when people try to say like out of intuition, or it just sounds like a whole bunch of nothing, right?
It's a whole bunch of nothing. And like, I wouldn't deny that human being the ability to have learned process intuitively, and they trust it and it works for them for a while. But when it stops working, I can guarantee you this, they won't know why. And they're not going to blame their intuition. I guarantee that. The study I was telling you about, I guess we can kind of wrap up here unless anybody has any questions or comments they want to make. But there was a study done of secondary infections in hospitals. You can look this up. And basically what they discovered is that 97% of infections, 97, it was high order magnitude, is it above 90, were created by guess who? Doctors. Doctor comes in, gives you a stick or delivers some medicine or something like that. And he's actually introducing the infection. What that means is that I went in because I needed to have, like, I had a cold, I had a flu, and I left with, an appendicitis infection or something like that. Like, because that's what happened. The doctor introduced secondary infections to the patient. So what they did is they did a test case study where they gave the doctor a checklist, and the nurse ensured that he followed the checklist. Guess what the infection rate dropped to? Like 0.
Wow.
Why? Process, man. Everybody thinks they're smarter than they are. Everybody thinks they'll remember. We won't. We don't. There's so many things that interrupt us. There's so many variables that are involved.
Yeah. I
missed a trade. I missed a short, biggest short of the entire week, 2 weeks ago. I didn't post it. I did a bad job of not posting some of my my bad stuff. Not because I didn't want to, but just because I was frustrated and I forgot that I should do that. The reason was, for the first time in weeks, I opened up Twitter and said, I wonder what this guy thinks about this. And he said, I'm going to wait until the news is over and then I'll trade. And I said, that sounds reasonable. Well, guess where my trade materialized? 2 minutes before news was released. Does my process say I'm not allowed to trade during news? Nope. So what did I do? I complicated my process because I'm a human being and I do stuff like that, even though I knew better.
Yep.
So what is wrong with my process? Let's just, as a group, let's solve that problem for me. How could I solve that from a process standpoint? Thinking in first principles, how could we solve that?
I mean, you got to look at your process and like you say, the checklist thing. Like if it's in the checklist and everything's being checked off, and that's a part of your process, you said you can trade
Yep.
during the news, and what a guy on Twitter is making that decision for you that you can't.
Yeah. Well, I
Right?
added a variable to a process that was made based on a lot of back history and study, and add no Twitter to process. Yeah, mine was no new
Yeah.
variables. That was how I did it. I said no new variables, and I have a flight manual, and I literally flip through it on every single trade. I go, okay, here's what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And I just follow that. I still get stopped because that's just the way it works. But that's
And I
that's
feel
the
like
level of
most
detail you have to
people
get to.
most people don't have that. And I can be honest, like I've just recently gotten to that point of detail with my process and my setups of actually having like a written down like checklist for your different setups and actually asking yourself questions. Because otherwise it just, you get sucked into just like little triggers and like low quality trades because you don't actually know what you're looking for. If you don't like specifically know what you're looking for, you won't have any success. Like
That's
you have
right.
to define that.
Well, you have to be able to ask questions that you can actually get the answer to. Back to the context being ambiguous. Okay, now I know what the word means, but that doesn't make me a better trader because I understand the word context. This is a problem we have in our generation today, where vast numbers of people. I don't know how old you are, but you sound younger than me. And younger than me, everybody in that age group is basically, it's what I call the search engine generation. They believe that because they can find the information that means, and become acquainted with it, that means they're also knowledgeable about it. No, not true. Not true until you have experience, just like you already said, until you have the experience understanding, like you asked that question, how good of a job is the market doing moving up? I think it wants to move up. How good of a job is it doing? Well, wow, that's an ambiguous question, unless you have a year of screen time, and then you go, it's going up. Like it's pretty clear it's going up. As an example.
Yeah. No, for sure. You can't skip the screen time part as well, right?
Yeah. It's a requirement. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
Cliff's notes to experience. Well, Tyson, I appreciate this. I wanted to just do a shout out quickly to my website. I am a working guy just like the rest of you guys, and I offer this workshop that's meant to take you wherever you are, whatever stage of development that you're in, and go, to kind of go down the path we're going down now. But I have a process I use to pick apart all of your choices. And the idea is just click this Trader Workshop button and you can kind of see what it's all about, and the people that I've done that before with, and it'll explain the whole thing. And if you're interested in that, we can do a 15-minute sort of touch base, and you can schedule that with me, and then we can figure out if it's right for you or not. But what I'm absolutely passionate about is process, and I just happen to be skilled at it. This is something that I do every day with executives in my full-time job. I'm not going to tell you that I'm the best trader in the world. I'm not. I will never give you that impression. What I will tell you is I understand process better than most. And I'm really good at picking it apart. And it has helped me be a good trader. I'm not a great trader, but I'm a good trader. And I'd love to help you guys if possible. But I'm going to keep doing these interviews because this is something that I never get tired of talking about. And I never get tired of talking to traders about how to get better at this. And in particular, I'm passionate about the fact that I feel like there's a lot of ambiguity, and it's on purpose in this market. There's people that want to sell you indicators, and they want to tell you that it's your emotions, and I mean, it's not that they're wrong. I just think that there's so many things that we can do for ourselves that don't involve saying that I'm the problem, and that's kind of why I do this. So I've appreciated talking to you, Tyson, and maybe we could open up if anybody has any questions, or I can pass it back to Ziggy, however you want to kind of wrap us up. I still got some more time, but
it's been awesome to have you. I just really want to thank you for jumping on. And I guess if anybody has any last minute suggestion or anything like that, I thought we would wrap it up for 1/2 on the hour here, so it's only 3 minutes away. But thanks to both of you really for jumping on. And I think the next time if we do this again, we might try to squeeze in 2 people, because I know there was decent demand for people to try to pop on. So I think we'll look at potentially doing 2 next time if we can make it work. And huge thanks, both of you guys.
Hey, I have a quick question. Do you guys, in regards to the whole process thing, and like when you take a losing trade for you guys, do you guys like collect stats on your trades and try to like analyze like, hey, why was this a losing trade? How can I, maybe avoid these kinds of characteristics in this losing trade in the future? Because going back to like what you said, Casey, FT, sorry, I know you by your real name. I'm not trying to like say it out loud if you haven't given that away. But when you said we're just like human learning computers or something, like I really resonated with that. I completely agree. Like something I do is like whenever I take a loss, I don't just like brush it off. I think to myself, I just paid for data, right? Because sure, I took a loss, but that loss is going in my Excel sheet later at night. And I try to frame it from a sense of I just paid for that data to go into my Excel sheet.
Yep. I don't say those words, but I think I have the same like sentiment. I look at it like I'm a big believer in that the market should do what I think it should do. Otherwise, I wouldn't have taken the trade. So if I get stopped, I go, that shouldn't have happened. Was my risk in the right place? Yep. Did I follow the Yep, it was. Okay, that shouldn't have happened. So the market is telling me that what I think is happening is not happening, or at least it's not happening right now, and I just paid to find that out. So I'm with same exact kind of sentiment. I don't track that statistically. That's another thing actually that's kind of like in my background that I'm trying to do is I'm actually been trying to build an app that allows people to build and follow their process. One of the big problems I have with, just as a quick comment, one of the big problems I have with the TraderView and all those apps is that they're asking you to build a data model, and most traders have no concept of building a data model, so you don't even know what to track. You can track anything, but if you don't know what to track, then you're tracking nothing, even though you're putting a bunch of stuff in there. So I've been trying to build that in my background. I would love to have something like that I could deliver, but I basically look at it as a reason for me to shut everything down and come back a little bit later. Actually, is the way I address that.
That was interesting what you said there. Sorry, just about the, like when you take a loss, like, oh, that shouldn't have happened. It was a part of my process. You know what I mean? Like, okay, that's fine. Then you record that. How often would you say now that your losses are more that compared to after taking a loss, you realize variables that went wrong that could have been avoided? Or are you truly at the point where you feel all your losses, you're like, yeah, that's fine. That shouldn't have, I follow my process, that shouldn't have worked. Or it's like, oh, I missed this point, or be like, oh, that wasn't really a great trade. I should have waited a bit more. Like, where would you say you are with your losses at that point?
It's the trigger process where I get into an emotion it's basically over bias. If I get stopped, and my bias is correct, it's usually because I didn't have enough risk on the trade. I saw some reason to shorten it up, and I stopped. I basically stopped myself out, but the market wouldn't have had I just followed the execution process. You get nervous. You get a little bit on side. I don't know about you guys, but like have learned to be okay with retracements. I've learned to be on side, and then my process has evolved to the point where I'm okay with going onside and then going back offside. That's okay now. It didn't used to be. So the biggest dilemma that I have is if I'm sure that I'm right about bias, but I'm actually wrong, that's where my stops will accumulate quickly. And if I don't, two is basically what it takes. If I take two stops in a row and I think I'm right about bias, I'm definitely wrong about bias. I'm definitely wrong. And I have to shut everything down and walk away. If I don't, I will blow up my computer. I've done it so many times. It's not even funny.
So that's kind of your trigger on a daily basis. Like if you have two in a row, you're like, okay, I know.
Where I'm sure of the bias. There's a complexity like everything. Yeah, I have to be sure of the bias. If I just am taking a stab, like what your example was, If I'm just taking a stab and I get stopped, that's a problem. I don't actually know what's going on. I don't have any reason to think it should do this. It's just basically a trigger.
Yeah.
So I really, I'm trying to get to the point where I absolutely will not even click a button until I'm sure that I know what the bias is. But that's not a process problem. See, process is only half of the dilemma. That's why I tried to make the point about experience. Then I have to build the experience with what the right process actually is for me. You can't just say, "Oh, my process is a problem. Now I know what it is. Now I'll never screw up again." No, that's not true. You don't have any experience hitting home runs. So that's an awesome question.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Ziggy, I know we're a little over. By the way, I don't know if we're hoping to do this once a month. I'd love to get through everybody. I think this is great. I think this is helpful for everybody, and I love doing it. So, however you guys want to go at it, I'm free. I'm game.
Yeah, we can have a chat about scheduling the next one, and then I'll announce the date, and we can pick 2 people for the next one, and we can just try to run through them. That would be great. That'd be awesome.
Brilliant.
Yeah, great stuff today, guys. Appreciate everybody jumping on, and everybody else for taking a listen in too.
Yeah, thanks a lot, KCFT.
Yeah, you got it, Tyson.
It's nice meeting you and talking, and everyone else who popped in to listen. I'm looking forward to listening to other people too.
Same here.
Definitely. Take care, guys.
Take care.
Yeah, have a good one.